Why was everyone staring at her? The woman at the far end of the bar didn't seem to notice. She sat alone, posture straight, shoulders squared, every movement measured, the kind of stillness that didn't belong in a place filled with noise and laughter. Ali's Bar, San Diego. Friday night. The place smelled of spilled beer, salt air, and fatigue, the unofficial scent of every off-duty soldier trying to forget what the world asked of them. Jake Morrison leaned on the counter, whiskey in hand, staring past the reflection in the mirror wall. His own face looked older under the amber lights, harder. 12 years as a Navy SEAL would do that. You didn't survive that long without leaving pieces of yourself scattered across continents. He'd been dragged here by Marcus, his best friend and team medic. Marcus had a theory that loneliness was lethal, and whiskey was the antidote. Jake wasn't so sure either was true, but he'd stopped arguing. "Man, you've been nursing that drink for 30 minutes, Marcus muttered beside him. "At least pretend you're having fun. You're making the rest of us look bad." Jake gave a small, humorless smile. "Fun's a foreign language lately." Marcus snorted. "Yeah, well, maybe you need a new translator." Then Marcus's eyes shifted, following Jake's line of sight. He whistled low. "Or maybe she's the answer right there." Jake didn't move. Didn't want to. The woman across the room had caught his attention the second she'd walked in, not because she was beautiful, though she was, but because she carried herself like someone who'd seen the edge and decided not to fall. She had auburn hair pulled into a neat twist and eyes that flicked around the room with quiet precision, cataloging exits, reading people. That kind of awareness didn't come from bartending or casual nights out. That was training. And yet she didn't look military. No uniform, no unit patch, just a black leather jacket, jeans, and the confidence of someone who didn't need to prove a thing. "Go talk to her," Marcus nudged him, "before one of these flybies over there tries." Jake laughed softly, shaking his head. "You think I'm that desperate?" "No," Marcus said, grinning. "I think you're that curious." He was, but curiosity could be dangerous in their world. Still, when her eyes met his across the crowd, calm, sharp, unreadable, something in his chest tightened. She didn't look away. Instead, she raised her glass slightly, an unspoken challenge. Jake exhaled. "All right, screw it." He stood, left his half-empty whiskey on the bar, and crossed the room. The music faded in his mind, the laughter dulling to static. All he could hear was the sound of his boots against the sticky floor and the faint clink of her ice melting in glass. "Mind if I join you?" he asked. She turned to face him, and for a heartbeat, Jake forgot how to breathe. Up close, she wasn't what he'd expected. Not just beautiful, something more. She had lines at the corner of her eyes, the kind that came from squinting through dust and sunlight, not vanity. Her voice, when she spoke, was soft but firm, like silk stretched over steel. "I was wondering when you'd work up the courage," she said. "Name Sarah." Jake took her offered hand. Firm grip, calloused palm, a faint scar on the ridge of her knuckles. He filed away every detail instinctively, the way SEALs did when they didn't yet know if they were safe. "Jake," he said. "SEAL?" she asked, not teasing, just curious. He arched a brow. "That obvious?" She smiled. "Only to someone who's been around enough of you." They talked. For over an hour, maybe more. Time had a strange way of bending when conversation felt real. She didn't flirt the way others did. She listened. Asked questions that landed deep, about the kind of silence that came after deployment, about what it meant to return to a world that had moved on without you. He found himself telling her things he never said aloud, about the brothers he'd lost, about the smell of sand that never quite left his clothes, about the constant hum of waiting, for orders, for danger, for peace that never came. She didn't interrupt, didn't offer cliches or sympathy. She just nodded, eyes glinting with something that looked an awful lot like understanding. And when she spoke about herself, it was with careful precision. She'd done consulting work overseas, security contracts, the kind of phrases that danced around the truth without ever touching it. Jake knew the language. Hell, he used it every day. She was one of them, or used to be. By the time the crowd thinned and the bartender began wiping counters, Jake realized he'd barely touched his drink. Sarah's had been empty for half an hour. He hesitated, studying her face. Something about her gnawed at him like a word on the tip of his tongue, a memory not yet formed. "All right," he said finally, leaning forward with a half-smile. "Tell me something honest. What's your call sign?" It was a test, the kind of question only someone who'd been there would understand. Civilians wouldn't get it. Operators would hesitate. But those who'd earned one, well, it meant something sacred. She looked at him for a long moment. Then, slowly, her lips curved into a smile that was both warm and dangerous. "Viper 1," she said. 2 words. That's all it took for Jake's world to stop. The glass in his hand slipped. It hit the floor, shattered. Whiskey splattered across his boots, but Jake didn't notice. The name echoed in his head like a detonation. Viper 1. He heard it again, not in her voice but through static-filled comms, years ago, a world away. Viper 1 inbound, ETA 90 seconds. No, impossible. His heart hammered, breath shallow. He stared at her like she'd just come back from the dead, because, in a way, she had. "Say that again," he whispered. Sarah's smile faded, replaced by a flicker of something recognition and pain. "You were on that mountain," she said quietly. "Team 7, Extraction Point Delta." Jake's throat went dry. He could barely nod. "You were the one coordinating with me over comms," she continued. "I remember your voice." Her words hit harder than any firefight he'd ever survived. Afghanistan, 3 years ago, the op that haunted his dreams, the one that went wrong before it went right because of her. Viper 1, the pilot who'd defied orders, who'd flown into a kill zone through burning air and tracer fire just to get them out, the one they said didn't make it back. He attended her memorial, watched her name carved into a plaque. He stood there, head bowed, heart heavy, mourning a stranger he never got to thank. And now she was sitting in front of him, flesh, blood, whiskey, and silence. "They told us you died," Jake said. Her gaze softened. "I had to." He frowned. "What the hell does that mean?" She glanced away, eyes distant. The mission wasn't supposed to exist. There were politics, deals, things that couldn't see daylight. They needed a casualty to bury it all under, so they chose me. Her tone wasn't bitter, just matter of fact, like she'd already fought the anger, lost, and made peace with it. "I spent 3 years off-grid," she said. "Different name, new file. I wasn't supposed to come back." Jake leaned back, processing, heart still thundering. He wanted to ask 100 questions, how she survived, what she'd seen, who gave the order, but he could see from her eyes that some truths stayed buried for a reason. "So instead," he said softly, "we lit candles for you. Marcus gave a toast, said no one flies like Viper 1. A shadow crossed her face, something between pride and grief. "I watched that service," she murmured, "from a car across the street." Jake froze. "I saw you all there," she continued. "Wanted to walk in, wanted to tell you I was alive, but that would have put you in danger, so I stayed a ghost." The words landed heavy. The kind of heaviness that didn't break you instantly, it just sank, slow and deep. Jake rubbed his jaw, exhaled. "You saved my team that night. Saved me. I thought about your voice every damn time I flew after that. Tried to imagine what kind of person you were." "Now you know," she said with a faint, sad smile. Silence stretched between them, not awkward but sacred, like the kind that followed a prayer. Outside, the San Diego air was cool and quiet. The night hummed with distant traffic, seagulls, and ocean wind. When they stepped out, Jake followed her to the curb, neither of them ready to say goodbye. "You ever think about going back?" he asked. She looked up at the stars. "All the time, but you can't resurrect someone the world already buried." There was something in her voice, not regret but resolve. Jake studied her face under the streetlight. "So what are you now?" She smiled faintly. "Still flying, just different missions." He nodded, though he knew there was more she wasn't saying. But maybe that was okay. Some stories weren't meant to be told, only felt. They stood there for a long time, two soldiers who'd already died once, in different ways, finding life again in the unlikeliest place. Before she turned to leave, Sarah paused. "You asked for honesty tonight," she said. "So here's mine. I didn't expect to see you again, and I didn't think it would hurt this much to remember." Then she walked away. Jake watched her go, the sound of her boots fading into the city's heartbeat. He stood there until the neon lights flickered off, the bar door locked behind him, and the horizon began to pale with dawn. He didn't know if he'd ever see her again, but he knew one thing: Viper One wasn't just a ghost from his past anymore. She was real, and for the first time in years, so was he. He couldn't stop hearing it. Viper One. All night the words looped through Jake's mind like an old radio transmission that refused to fade. Even when he finally closed his eyes, he was back on that mountain, smoke, dust, chaos, and her voice cutting through it all. Calm, unshakable, promising a way out when death had been closing in. 3 years ago. And yet she'd been alive all this time. By morning, the San Diego sunlight looked harsher than usual. The bass came alive with the usual rhythm, PT runs pounding across asphalt, orders barked, jets carving the sky. But for Jake, the familiar noise felt wrong, out of sync. He went through motions like muscle memory: shower, shave, uniform, briefing. But every thought led back to her. Was she in danger, or part of something darker? During the team briefing, Commander Reeves outlined their next deployment window. Jake nodded where appropriate, but his mind was elsewhere. They needed a casualty to bury it all under, so they chose me. That line gnawed at him. After dismissal, Marcus caught him in the hallway. "You look like hell, brother, late night." Jake hesitated. How could he even explain it? "I ran into someone," he said. Marcus smirked. "Oh yeah, she got a name." He met his friend's eyes. "Sarah, call sign Viper One." The smile vanished. "That's not funny." "I'm not joking." Marcus froze, the blood draining from his face. "Jake, Viper One died in Afghanistan." "I know, but she didn't." For a moment, neither spoke. Then Marcus exhaled slowly, disbelief mixing with hope. "You're telling me the ghost who pulled us off that mountain was sitting in a bar last night?" Jake nodded. Marcus rubbed his temples. "Either you're losing it, or there's a story we were never supposed to know." Both could be true. He meant it, because in their world, truth was never clean. It was layered in classified ink and buried under phrases like operational necessity and plausible deniability. That evening, Jake sat alone in his apartment overlooking Coronado. The ocean outside shimmered silver under the moonlight, calm and indifferent. He opened his laptop, connecting to the secure Navy network, credentials flashing across the screen. If Sarah had faked her death, someone had filed the report. Someone had signed off on it. And maybe, somewhere, that signature would lead him to the truth. He searched for Operation Silver Falcon, their mission 3 years ago. Access DNID. He tried the tail number of the downed helo. Access DNID. Even his clearance, top secret 12 years in, hit a wall of red text. Unauthorized inquiry logged. He leaned back, jaw tight. Whatever Sarah had been part of was still locked down tight. That wasn't standard procedure for a mission that old. A knock at his door made him flinch. He checked the peephole. "Sarah." She stood there in a black hoodie, hair tied back, expression unreadable. For a moment, he didn't move, half of him thinking she'd vanish again if he blinked. Then he opened the door. "Can I come in?" she asked quietly. He stepped aside. The silence between them felt heavier than the night before, like the air between confession and consequence. She looked around his apartment, eyes scanning details the way soldiers did: exits, windows, sightlines. "You're still living like you're deployed," she said softly, noticing the bare walls and the cot-style bed. "Never really stopped," he replied. She nodded, a faint smile tugging at her lips, then faded. "I figured you start digging." Jake didn't deny it. "You faked your death, Sarah. I had to know why." Her shoulders stiffened, not by choice. He waited. Finally, she sank onto the edge of the couch, elbows on her knees. "After that mission, I was supposed to exfil with your team, but Command changed the plan midair. They rerouted me to extract a second group, intel officers pinned down 2 clicks east. I went back in." Jake frowned. "Alone?" "Yeah, radio silence. No backup. When I lifted them out, we took an RPG to the tail. I barely made it over the ridge before the bird went down. Command declared me KIA to keep the mission compartmentalized. The people I pulled out weren't supposed to exist." Jake sat beside her, processing every word. "And you just accepted it." Her laugh was small, bitter. "Acceptance isn't the right word. Survival was." She looked at him then, really looked. "You know what it's like to come home and realize you don't have a home anymore, to watch your own funeral from a distance." Jake said nothing, but he understood. Too many operators came back ghosts long before the body did. "So what now?" he asked. "Why come back after 3 years?" "I didn't come back for me," she said, voice low. "One of the men I saved, Major Lansing, he's gone missing. The same people who erased me are hunting him. I need help." Jake's pulse quickened. "You think it's connected to Silver Falcon?" She nodded. "Everything is." For a long moment, neither spoke. Outside, a helicopter thudded overhead, its echo vibrating through the thin apartment walls. Jake turned toward her. "You trust me?" She hesitated, then nodded. "You were the voice that kept me sane that night. I trust that." He stood. "Then we find him." 2 nights later, Jake and Marcus sat in a parked truck overlooking a government storage hangar near North Island. Inside, decommissioned gear, flight logs, and, if Sarah was right, the original after-action report for Silver Falcon. "Remind me why we're doing this instead of, sleeping," Marcus muttered, checking his watch. Jake smirked. "Because someone buried Viper 1, and I want to know who handed them the shovel." Sarah's voice crackled softly through the comm. "You're clear. Security rotation changes in 6 minutes. Make it fast." She was running Overwatch from a rooftop a block away, laptop open, feeding them surveillance. Her focus was absolute, calm, commanding. Hearing her again on comms hit Jake like déjà vu. They moved. Inside the hangar, dust floated through narrow beams of light. Rows of forgotten crates stretched into darkness. Jake found the record lockers near the back, stacked binders labeled with call signs and mission codes. He pulled one marked SFOps 2018. Marcus covered the door. 5 minutes. Jake flipped pages until he found it: Silver Falcon. The text was blacked out line after line, but a name slipped through the redaction: Major Henry Lansing, CIA liaison. He snapped a quick photo. "Got it." Then his earpiece buzzed. "Jake," Sarah whispered, "you've got company, 2 guards coming from the south entrance." They froze. Jake whispered, "Exit plan." "North door, go now." They bolted, footsteps echoing. Marcus cursed under his breath. The guards' flashlights cut through the dark. One shouted, "Hey, stop." Jake shoved open the door, sprinting into the night. Tires screeched as they dove into the truck. "Drive," Sarah yelled through comms. Marcus floored it. The truck roared down the access road, red lights spinning behind them. Jake looked back, adrenaline surging. "Congratulations," Marcus grunted. "We're officially felons." "Wouldn't be the first time," Jake said, catching Sarah's figure in the rearview mirror. Already gone, melted into the night like she'd never been there. Hours later, they regrouped at an abandoned airfield outside the city. Sarah spread out printouts across the hood of Jake's truck, maps, photos, coded strings of numbers. She pointed to a satellite image. Lansing was stationed here 6 months before he disappeared. Black River security, private contractors, heavy funding, zero transparency. Jake frowned. And you think they're tied to the fake death? I know they are, she said, because they were the ones who recovered my wreckage, and because, she hesitated, eyes darkening, because I used to work for them. Jake's breath caught. You were one of theirs. Before I ever flew for the Navy, before Viper 1 existed. The revelation shifted everything. He studied her face, the flicker of guilt there. Why come clean now? Because Lansing has the only evidence that can expose them, she said. And if they find him first, they'll finish what they started with him and with me. She turned away, looking toward the horizon. I shouldn't have dragged you into this. Jake stepped closer. Too late, you already did. Their eyes met, and for the first time since that night in the bar, Sarah's composure cracked. The woman who had flown through hell looked tired, human. I lost 3 years of my life, she said softly. I can't lose what's left of it running. Jake's voice was low, steady. Then stop running. She looked up at him, searching, uncertain. You don't even know what you're risking. He smiled faintly. You saved my life once. Let me return the favor. The words hung between them, heavier than any promise. Somewhere beyond the runway lights, the ocean whispered against the shore, indifferent to the secrets about to surface. Sarah folded the maps, slipping them into her jacket. If we're doing this, she said, we do it my way. Jake nodded, then lead the way, Viper 1. For a heartbeat, something like warmth flickered across her face, half gratitude, half sorrow. Because beneath her strength, Jake could see it now, the cost of living as a ghost, the loneliness of being erased from your own story. As the first hint of dawn painted the horizon, they climbed into the truck, engines humming, heading toward the truth neither of them was ready to face. Behind them the past stirred, files, lies, and names written in ink that refused to fade. Ahead, the road stretched quiet and endless. And in the silence between gears, Sarah's voice came soft through the hum of the tires. Jake, do you ever wonder if the mission ends, or if it just changes shape? He looked out the window at the rising light. Maybe it never ends, he said. Maybe the mission is learning how to live after it's over. She didn't answer, but he saw the corner of her mouth lift, the smallest, saddest smile. And as the truck rolled on, both of them knew the next battle wouldn't be fought with guns or orders, but with truth. Why did the sunrise feel heavier that morning? Maybe because truth was finally catching up. The truck rumbled down the coastal highway, empty except for 2 people who had no business being alive or together. Jake drove, eyes locked on the horizon. Sarah sat beside him, maps and encrypted notes in her lap, the wind brushing stray hair across her face. Neither spoke for miles. There was too much to say and too many ghosts listening. The radio hummed softly, an old country song about coming home. Jake reached forward and turned the volume down. So where exactly are we going? Sarah didn't look up. A contact of mine, someone who owes me a favor. If Lansing's alive, he'll know where to start. Jake shot her a glance. And you trust him? I used to, she said. Then after a pause, that's the problem. They reached a weathered diner on the outskirts of Yuma, Arizona. Neon sign flickering, air shimmering with desert heat. Sarah slipped on a pair of aviators, scanning the parking lot before they went inside. To anyone watching, they looked like 2 travelers stopping for coffee. But Jake noticed her right hand hovering close to her jacket pocket, where he knew she kept her sidearm. Inside, the diner smelled of burnt coffee and grease. An old jukebox whispered in the corner. Only 3 customers, a trucker, a waitress, and a man sitting at the back booth, tall, clean-cut, wearing civilian clothes that didn't quite fit the way civilians wore them. He looked up as they approached, eyes narrowing before recognition softened them. Sarah. She stopped at the edge of the booth. Eli. The air between them carried history. Jake slid into the seat across from him, staying silent. Eli studied him for a moment. This your new co. Old friend, Sarah corrected. Jake Morrison. Eli's gaze lingered, assessing, measuring. Then he nodded once, slow. Seal, I can tell. Jake leaned back. That obvious. Your posture, the way you scan the exits every 10 seconds. Same curse we all carry. He wasn't wrong. Eli motioned for the waitress. 3 coffees, black. Once she left, his expression hardened. You shouldn't have come here, Sarah. They're still watching the network, if they know you're alive. They already do, she interrupted. Which means I don't have time to play safe anymore. I need to find Lansing. Eli's jaw clenched. Lansing, gone dark for a reason. You think you're the only one they erased. He found something that scared the hell out of people above our pay grade. Jake spoke up. Like what? Eli hesitated, then reached into his jacket, sliding an old USB drive across the table. Black River wasn't just running security contracts. They were running ghost ops missions under multiple flags. Russia, US private bidders. Money over loyalty, you name it. Sarah frowned. That's treason. He nodded. Yeah, but it's also business. The kind nobody ever admits exists. She took the drive. And Lansing. Last I heard, he had evidence, names, accounts, directives. He tried to leak it through an intermediary, but they intercepted him before he could get out of Mexico. That was 2 weeks ago. Jake exhaled. So he's either hiding or he's gone. Eli's gaze flicked between them. If you're smart, you'll let him stay gone. Sarah's eyes sharpened. You forget who you're talking to. I remember exactly who I'm talking to, Eli said quietly. The woman who flew a Black Hawk into a storm of gunfire because she couldn't stand to leave anyone behind. That's your problem, Sarah. You don't know when to walk away. For a moment, something fragile cracked behind her calm mask, but it passed quickly. Jake could feel the tension like static in the air. He leaned forward, his voice low but steady. Maybe that's not a flaw. Maybe that's the reason we're all still here. Eli looked at him, something like reluctant respect flickering in his eyes. Then he stood. That drive, your key. But if you open it, you better be ready for what's inside. He walked out without another word. Sarah watched him go, jaw tight. He's scared. Of what? Jake asked. She turned the USB drive in her hand, its surface catching the light. The truth. They drove another hour before stopping at a small motel off the interstate. Jake carried a portable decryption unit, one he wasn't supposed to have. Old habits. As the screen came alive, the first folder appeared. Project Violin. Inside, names, coordinates, video logs. Contracts signed by high-ranking officials. Missions conducted under false flags. Entire operations hidden in plain sight. Jake scrolled through them, stomach tightening. Jesus, these aren't just private ops. These are state-sanctioned. Sarah nodded grimly. Lansing must have copied this before going underground. Then she froze. Her name appeared on the next page, LT. Sarah Dalton, status deceased. She stared at the word as if it were still true. Date of death, Jake murmured, reading the file, matches the day of your crash. Below it, directive, maintain cover. Operative reassigned to Deep Shadow Asset. Authorization, Black River Command. Jake looked up. They didn't just erase you, they kept you on the payroll. Sarah's voice dropped. I wasn't dead, I was property. The silence that followed felt suffocating. Jake leaned forward, tone soft. Sarah, what did they make you do after the crash? She hesitated too long, then, you don't want to know. Try me. Her eyes flicked to his. Extraction ops, assassinations. I was their ghost, Jake. They used my death as camouflage. I flew under no flag, killed under no name. And every time I wanted out, they reminded me I didn't exist. Jake swallowed hard. How'd you escape? Her gaze drifted to the window where the desert wind rattled the glass. I didn't. One day they just stopped calling. I think Lansing found something leverage, enough to pull me out. That's why they're hunting him. Jake sat back, anger simmering. The military taught him many things, but nothing prepared him for this kind of betrayal. You saved people your entire life, Sarah. They turned that against you. She looked down. We all serve something, I just forgot to ask who. Later, as the desert sun bled into the horizon, they sat outside on the motel's concrete steps. The heat softened, wind whispering through dry grass. Jake handed her a beer. You ever think about what it would have been like if none of that happened, if the crash never happened? She took a sip, eyes distant. Sometimes, then I realize I wouldn't have met you. He smiled faintly. That a good thing? She looked at him, really looked, and for the first time he saw the quiet ache behind her strength. Depends how this ends. There was a pause, the kind that says more than words ever could. Jake finally said, so what's next? We find Lansing, she said, before they do. And after? She stared at the horizon, voice barely a whisper. After that, I stop running. He nodded, not pressing further, because some promises weren't meant to be spoken aloud. That night while Sarah slept in the next room, Jake couldn't. He stared at the laptop screen, scrolling through the files again. One name caught his eye, Commander Reeves. His commanding officer. He opened the entry. Subject authorized full erasure protocol for Operative Viper 1. Compensation received via undisclosed offshore account. Jake's stomach dropped. The man he'd served under for 5 years. The man who'd given speeches about honor and loyalty. He closed the laptop slowly. Outside, the world was quiet, too quiet. Then came the headlights, 2 black SUVs rolling up the dirt road, no lights, moving fast. Jake was already moving. He burst into Sarah's room. We've got company. She was up instantly, pistol in hand. No confusion, no hesitation, pure instinct. They slipped out the back window as engines roared into the parking lot. Armed men poured out, faces covered, formation precise. Not amateurs. Black River, Sarah hissed. Jake glanced at her. You sure? They move like ghosts. Yeah, I'm sure. They sprinted across the dirt lot, staying low. Bullets shattered motel windows behind them. Jake returned fire, 2 quick bursts, enough to buy seconds. They dove behind a rusted dumpster as Sarah reloaded. We need to split, she shouted. Not happening. Jake, listen. Last time you went down alone, they buried you. Not again. Their eyes met. For a moment, everything else vanished, the noise, the gunfire, the fear. Just 2 people who'd already cheated death once, daring it to try again. Sarah nodded once. Truck, half a mile north, we move on 3. He counted, 1, 2, 3. They broke cover, sprinting into the open, bullets kicking up dirt at their heels. The roar of engines and the smell of burning rubber filled the air as Jake hotwired a nearby pickup. They barely made it out. As they sped away, headlights vanished behind them. The city lights shimmered in the distance like false promises. Jake gripped the wheel, adrenaline fatting into silence. Sarah stared out the window, hand trembling just slightly, the first sign of fear he'd seen from her. You okay? He asked quietly. She nodded, but her voice was a whisper. They know where we are now. There's no going back. Jake glanced at her, the woman who had once been a myth, now flesh and blood, hunted for the truth she carried. Then we go forward, he said, all the way. Her eyes met his, and for the first time that night she smiled, small, tired, real. Forward, she echoed. And as the desert swallowed their taillights, the question neither dared to ask hung in the air. How far could two ghosts go before the world erased them for good? How do you run from something that already buried you? The desert stretched endlessly, pale gold beneath a bruised sky. Dust trailed behind their truck like smoke from an old wound that refused to heal. Neither Jake nor Sarah had spoken in hours. The adrenaline had faded. Now there was only silence. Not the peaceful kind, the kind that carries weight, questions, regret. Sarah stared out the window, her reflection flickering with each passing mile. Her hands were steady again, but Jake noticed the faint tremor in her breathing, fear disguised as focus. "You ever get tired of surviving?" she asked quietly. Jake's grip on the steering wheel tightened. "Every day." She turned her head toward him, studying his profile. "Then why keep doing it?" He thought for a moment before answering. "Because the people who didn't make it don't get to anymore." Her lips parted, but she said nothing. The answer hit her harder than he knew. They stopped at an abandoned service station off the interstate, a forgotten place, walls sun-bleached, windows cracked. The kind of spot no one would look twice at. Jake pulled the truck behind the building, killed the engine. Sarah slid out, stretching her legs, scanning the horizon with instinctive precision. "We can't keep moving blind. They'll track the truck eventually." Jake nodded. "We need intel. Safe lines are burnt, but there's one person who might still talk to me." She raised a brow. "Who?" "Reeves." The name hung between them like a live grenade. Sarah turned slowly. "Your commanding officer." He nodded. "The same man who signed your death certificate," she reminded him. Jake looked away. "I need to hear it from him. Maybe he's part of it, maybe he's just another pawn. Either way, he knows where to find the truth." Sarah crossed her arms. "And you think walking back into his office is a good idea?" He smiled faintly. "No, that's why I'm not walking in, I'm calling him." She sighed, that deep, resigned kind of exhale soldiers make when they know the fight's inevitable. "Then let me do the talking if it goes south." Jake smirked. "You planning to shoot through the phone?" "Wouldn't be my first time." An hour later, they sat inside the station, dust swirling in thin shafts of sunlight. Jake's encrypted sat phone rested on the table between them. He hesitated before pressing the call button. The line rang once, twice. Then Morrison. Jake froze, Reeves's voice, calm, controlled, exactly as he remembered. "It's me, sir." A pause, the faint sound of papers shuffling. "You're supposed to be in Virginia. Why are you calling from an unlisted signal?" Jake swallowed. "Needed to ask about Silver Falcon." Static, then a low sigh. "You know better than that." "I know I was there, and I know Viper 1 didn't die." The silence that followed was thick enough to choke on. When Reeves finally spoke again, his tone was quieter but dangerous. "Where did you hear that name?" "From her," Jake said. "She's alive." Reeves didn't answer. Then, "Walk away, Morrison." Jake clenched his jaw. "You owe me the truth." "I owe you nothing," Reeves said coldly. "And if you value what's left of your life, you'll forget she ever existed." The line clicked dead. Jake stared at the sat phone, pulse pounding. Sarah's expression didn't change, but her voice came low. "He's in on it." Jake nodded. "Yeah, and now he knows I know." They moved again before nightfall, taking back roads through the desert toward the mountains. Sarah drove this time, her focus razor-sharp. As the sky deepened to twilight, she said, "You trusted him, didn't you?" Jake's eyes stayed on the horizon. "He was my for 5 years, the kind of man who preached honor like it was gospel." She gave a soft, humorless laugh. "Funny thing about gospel, it's usually written by the people in power." He looked at her. "You sound like someone who's lost faith." "I did," she said simply. "Then I found something better." "What's that?" "Truth. It doesn't lie, even when it hurts." By midnight, they'd reached a remote cabin Jake knew, a safe house used years ago during counterintel exercises. It was half collapsed now, but the power still worked. They parked under the overhang, killed the lights, and went inside. Sarah set up the laptop, connecting the USB drive. If Reeves is tied to Black River, he'll have left breadcrumbs. No one in command wipes everything clean, not unless they're running scared. Jake leaned against the wall, watching her fingers move across the keys with surgical precision. "You always this good at hacking?" She smirked faintly. "When you're erased from existence, you get creative." Lines of code flickered. Then suddenly a file opened, Reeves's private correspondence. Jake's chest tightened as he read. From CMDR T. Reeves. To Black River Directorate. Subject: Containment Protocol. Ensure V1 remains permanently classified. Asset remains national liability. Operative's continued existence compromises multiple covert agreements. Execute final erasure if contact is re-established. Sarah sat back, face pale in the monitor's glow. "He ordered a kill list on me." Jake's hands curled into fists. "On both of us now." Before either could speak, headlights flickered through the cracked window. A single beam, then another. Jake whispered, "We've got company." Sarah closed the laptop, grabbed her gear. They traced the call. They slipped out the back, boots crunching gravel, the air cool and dry. The desert stretched open, no cover for miles. Two silhouettes moved between the vehicles. Tactical gear, suppressors efficient. Jake motioned left, Sarah right. Years of training snapped into instinct. A shadow passed close. Jake moved first, silent, swift, disarming the man with a twist and striking the throat cleanly. The body dropped soundlessly. Another flash, Sarah fired once precise. The second man crumpled. Silence. Then Jake noticed something glinting under the dead man's collar, a patch. Not Black River, Navy issue. He frowned. "These aren't contractors, they're ours." Sarah stared. "Reeves sent them." The weight of betrayal settled between them like smoke. Jake looked down at the men, soldiers who'd probably believed they were serving justice. "He's cleaning house," he muttered, "and we're the dirt." Sarah holstered her weapon, voice quiet. "So we make noise." They buried the bodies in the sand before dawn. No ceremony, no words, just the silent understanding of soldiers who'd seen too many graves. When it was done, Sarah wiped the sweat from her brow, staring at the horizon where the sun was bleeding into gold. Jake watched her, the way her eyes softened against the light. Even now, hunted, haunted, she carried herself like a soldier still flying through chaos. He said quietly, "You don't have to keep fighting, you know." She turned to him. "Don't I?" "Maybe not like this." Her voice cracked just slightly. "Jake, the day I stopped fighting is the day they won." He looked away, jaw tight. "Then we fight smarter." She gave a tired smile. "You have a plan." He nodded. "If Reeves wants silence, we give him noise. Let's expose him." Her brow furrowed. "You're talking about going public." He shrugged. "Not directly, we leak pieces. Data, documents, enough to make them nervous. Nervous people make mistakes." Sarah stared at him, studying the shift in his tone, not just tactical but personal. For the first time, she realized he wasn't doing this for duty anymore. He was doing it for her. And maybe for the version of himself that still believed in right and wrong. She whispered, "You know this could kill us." He met her eyes. "Then we make it count." That night, as they prepared to move again, Sarah sat beside the small campfire, flames flickering across her face. She stared at the stars, quiet, endless, indifferent. Jake joined her, handing over a tin of coffee. She took it, sipping in silence. After a while, she said, "Do you ever wonder if the people we lost are watching us?" He thought about the mountain, the men, the voices on the radio that had gone silent mid-sentence. "Sometimes," he said, "and I wonder what they'd think if they saw what's left of us." Sarah's smile was faint, bittersweet. "Maybe they'd just be glad we're still trying." Trying to what? To do something that matters. The fire popped softly between them. Jake studied her face, the quiet strength, the exhaustion, the ache that came from carrying too much alone. "You're not a ghost, Sarah," he said finally. "You're the proof they couldn't erase." She looked up at him, a long, searching glance, then whispered, "If that's true, don't let them turn you into one too." Jake nodded, heart heavy but steady. "Deal." By morning, they were gone. The cabin stood empty, the fire cold. Only the desert wind remained, carrying faint echoes of voices, of promises, of two soldiers who refused to die quietly. Somewhere miles away, Commander Reeves sat in his office, staring at a new report on his desk. The words "unauthorized data breach" flashed across the top. Beneath it, two names were underlined in red. Morrison Dalton. He leaned back, exhaled, and for the first time in years looked afraid. Far from the base, Jake and Sarah watched the sunrise from a cliff overlooking the valley. The light crept slow and golden over the earth, fragile, unbothered, eternal. She whispered, almost to herself, "Funny thing about ghosts." Jake turned. "What?" "They always come back for the living." He smiled faintly. "Then let's haunt them properly." And as the first full light of dawn hit their faces, two soldiers who'd been written off as dead made a silent promise, not for revenge, but for truth. Because sometimes dignity doesn't shout. It just refuses to disappear. What would you do if the truth could destroy everything you once swore to protect? That question followed Jake Morrison like a shadow as he and Sarah drove deeper into the mountains, their stolen truck humming through winding back roads. The morning sun painted the desert in streaks of gold and dust, and for a fleeting second, it almost felt peaceful. Almost. The laptop sat open on Sarah's knees, its glow pale in the dim cabin. Files scrolled by, messages, bank logs, operation codes. Every line another crack in the armor of the institution they once called home. Jake glanced over. "How much do we have?" Sarah didn't look up. Enough to prove Reeves worked with Black River, not enough to bring them down. He frowned. "Then we get more." She shook her head. "We can't keep chasing ghosts, Jake. They have resources we don't. If we push too far, they'll erase us again, permanently this time." He tightened his grip on the wheel. "Then we don't chase, we hunt." Her eyes lifted to meet his. There was something different in his tone now, harder, colder. She recognized it. It was the voice of a man who'd stopped expecting mercy. "Jake," she said softly, "whatever you're planning, think before you act. We can't fight this like a mission. This isn't war, it's corruption. It eats from the inside." He didn't answer right away, just stared at the road ahead. Then maybe it's time someone lit a fire from the inside too. They reached a secluded cabin compound north of Bishop by evening, one of the old off-grid locations Jake's unit had used for wilderness survival training. Solar panels, a water tank, and a line of comms equipment covered in dust. Perfect. Sarah went straight to work. She connected the satellite uplink, rerouting signals through half a dozen dead nodes across Europe. Jake loaded the USB drive into a second system, scrubbing identifiers. They worked in silence, the kind of wordless coordination that only came from soldiers used to operating under fire. When Sarah finally spoke, her voice was low. "There's a journalist, name's Erin Cole, ex-duty analyst. She's been digging into private contractor misconduct for years. If we can get this to her, it'll go public." Jake arched a brow. "You trust her?" "I trust her cause. She lost her brother in one of their operations. She won't let it die quietly." Jake nodded. "Then she's our shot." They sent a coded message through encrypted channels, a breadcrumb trail only someone with the right clearance would recognize. Then they waited. Hours passed. The wind howled against the windows, sand whispering through the cracks. Jake cleaned his rifle out of habit. Sarah sat near the window, eyes scanning the horizon. You ever wonder what normal feels like? She asked suddenly. He looked up. All the time. Tell me, she said, what does it look like to you? Jake smiled faintly. Waking up without checking the perimeter, coffee that doesn't taste like dirt, a bed that doesn't smell like sweat and gun oil. She laughed softly, a sound so rare it made the air feel lighter. That's your dream. He shrugged. Normal's underrated. She looked down, fingers tracing the rim of her cup. Mine's simpler. What is it? Silence, she said, the kind that isn't dangerous. Jake studied her for a moment. You miss who you were before all this. Sarah's expression softened. I miss who I could have been if none of this happened. A soft ping interrupted the silence. Sarah turned back to the laptop. Aaron's online, she said. Jake came over. The screen flickered, showing a grainy video feed, a woman in her 40s, sharp eyes, headset on. Whoever you are, Aaron said, you're using old naval encryption. That narrows it down. Care to introduce yourselves? Sarah leaned closer. Name's Viper 1. The woman's face changed instantly, recognition, disbelief. That's impossible. Was, Sarah corrected, not anymore. Aaron exhaled slowly. You were listed KIA 3 years ago. Not dead, Sarah said, just buried alive. Jake stepped into view. We have proof. Files linking Black River and Commander Reeves. Off-books payments, directives, kill orders. Aaron's tone sharpened. You understand what you're holding. This isn't just military corruption. This ties into congressional contracts, intelligence networks, foreign funding. If you leak this wrong, you won't make it 24 hours. Sarah met her gaze. Then we leak it right. Aaron hesitated, then nodded. Send me what you've got. I'll cross-verify with my sources. But if I do this, there's no turning back for either of you. Jake's voice was steady. We passed that point 3 days ago. The call ended. Sarah exhaled, closing the laptop. For the first time in days, a flicker of something like hope crossed her face. Jake smiled faintly. Feels good, doesn't it? She nodded. Hope's dangerous, but yeah, it feels good. They didn't sleep much that night. Sarah sat near the fire, staring into the flames. Jake lay back on his cot, eyes tracing the ceiling. Jake, she said softly. Yeah. If this works and the truth gets out, she hesitated. What then? He turned his head toward her. Then we start over. She gave a small smile. People like us don't get to start over. Maybe not, he said, but maybe we can stop someone else from ending the same way. She looked at him for a long time. You still believe we're the good guys? He didn't answer immediately. Then, I believe we can be. The next morning, everything went wrong. Sarah woke to the sound of static. The laptop was flashing alerts, data breaches, multiple pings from unknown IPs. They found us, she whispered. Jake was already grabbing gear. Move fast. She yanked the hard drive, stuffed it into her jacket. The sound of engines grew louder outside, helicopters this time. Too fast, Jake muttered. They were tracking the feed. Within seconds, the cabin windows rattled from the downdraft. Dust and pine needles whipped through the air. Sarah's voice was calm, steady. Extraction route. Jake pointed east. Through the ridge, there's an old mining tunnel. We can lose them there. They sprinted into the trees as rotor blades thundered overhead. Bullets shredded bark behind them. Sarah fired once, twice, clean, controlled bursts. Keep moving, Jake shouted. They dove into the ravine, scrambling over rocks and roots until they reached the entrance of the tunnel, narrow, half-collapsed, pitch black beyond the first few feet. Jake grabbed a flashlight. After you. Sarah smirked faintly. Still a gentleman, huh? He grinned despite the chaos. Don't get used to it. They slipped inside just as the first soldiers crested the ridge. The tunnel was cold, silent except for their breathing and the distant echo of boots above. The light danced across jagged rock, dust swirling like smoke. After several hundred meters, they reached a dead end. Sarah frowned. This isn't right. The map showed a second exit. Jake scanned the wall, unless it collapsed. She cursed under her breath. So what now? He looked at her steady, certain. We dig. They used whatever they could find, an old crowbar, loose metal pipes. Minutes turned into hours, the sound of scraping and falling stone mixing with their breathing. Finally, daylight filtered through a crack. Got it, Jake said, almost through. Then a click. Sarah froze. Jake, don't move. He turned slowly. A tripwire, barely visible, stretched across the path. She knelt carefully, tracing it with her fingers. Pressure detonator, military issue. He exhaled, Reeves's signature all over it. Hold still. Her hands worked fast, precise, controlled. Sweat dripped down her temple as she cut the wire, disarmed the charge, and tossed it aside. Jake finally breathed again. Remind me never to doubt your touch. She smiled, shaky but real. That would have been one hell of a final mission. They crawled through the gap into blinding sunlight, free again, but barely. Behind them, the tunnel collapsed with a rumbling groan. Dust and rock swallowed the path completely. Jake looked back once, watching the entrance seal shut. Guess going back's not an option anymore. Sarah nodded. It never was. By the time they reached the next town, their faces were on every classified watch list in the country. They kept their heads down, changed vehicles, traded IDs. Sarah pulled her hood low, her eyes tired but alert. We buy one day at a time now. Jake nodded. One day's enough. That night in a cheap motel room on the edge of nowhere, Sarah stood by the window, watching rain streak down the glass. Jake sat nearby, cleaning his weapon out of habit. Finally she spoke. You could walk away, you know, before this ends the way it always does. He looked up. And let you finish this alone. Her voice cracked just barely. You don't owe me anything. He shook his head. You saved me once, Sarah. Maybe not just that day on the mountain, maybe ever since. Her eyes glistened. You're going to get yourself killed. He smiled softly. Maybe, but at least this time it'll mean something. She turned away before he could see the tears she refused to let fall. Because deep down she knew this wasn't just about truth anymore. It was about redemption, for both of them. The next morning, Sarah's phone vibrated once, an encrypted message from Aaron Cole. Upload received, verification complete, going public at 600. Sarah's hands trembled as she read it. It's done, she whispered. Jake smiled faintly, then let the world burn. And for the first time in years, Sarah felt something she thought she'd lost forever. Not fear, not vengeance. Peace. Because sometimes, survival isn't about living unseen. It's about standing in the open and daring the world to look back. What happens when truth finally breaks the silence? When dawn came, the world wasn't the same. Sarah Dalton, call sign Viper 1, stared at the flickering motel television as breaking news cascaded across every channel. A headline in bold read read. Leaked FILES expose private contractor war crimes. High-ranking OFFICERS under investigation. Below it, an image of Commander Reeves, then Black River's logo, then a helicopter burning against a desert skyline. Her helicopter. She turned the volume up. Sources confirm that the whistleblower responsible for these leaks is a former U.S. pilot previously listed as killed in action during Operation Silver Falcon. Pentagon officials have neither confirmed nor denied the authenticity of the documents. Jake stood behind her, arms crossed, jaw set. His reflection glimmered in the window, backlit by the rising sun. You did it, he said quietly. Sarah's eyes stayed on the screen. We did it. But her voice lacked victory. There was something else, fear. Because truth had teeth, and now it was loose. Within hours, the world reacted. Headlines screamed, investigations launched, reporters crowded base gates, politicians denied, commanders resigned. And somewhere deep in the chain of command, men like Reeves started burning files. The phone on the motel nightstand buzzed. Sarah picked it up. A distorted voice crackled through. "You've made enemies on every continent, Viper." "Who is this?" she asked, though she already knew. "Someone who once believed in the same flag," the voice said. "They're coming for you, both of you." Then click. Jake glanced at her. "Friend of yours." She shook her head. "Old contact from Langley. If he called, it's real." He sighed. "Then we move, now." By nightfall, they'd switched cars again. An old silver sedan Jake borrowed from a dealership lot. They headed north toward Nevada, headlights cutting through the dark. "Where are we going?" Sarah asked. "Somewhere nobody cares to look," Jake said. "A place called Dry Creek. Population ghosts." She raised an eyebrow. "Sounds fitting." They drove for hours, neither speaking much. The road stretched endless, and the radio was filled with talk of the leak, government accountability, security breaches, speculation. At one point, Sarah reached over and turned it off. "I used to believe in silence," she said softly. "Now it feels like it's all that's left after the noise." Jake gave a quiet chuckle. "You ever notice how the truth never sounds like victory? It sounds like loss." She nodded, "Because someone always pays for it." They reached Dry Creek just past midnight. The town was more memory than place. A few buildings swallowed by dust, a gas station long abandoned, and an old chapel whose roof leaned sideways. Jake pulled into what used to be a mechanic's garage and killed the lights. "This'll do," he said. Sarah stepped out, scanning the still air. "It's quiet." "Too quiet." She smiled faintly. "You really can't turn it off, can you?" "Not in this life," he said. They hauled their bags inside and barricaded the door with a workbench. Sarah set up the laptop again, connecting to a satellite node. Within minutes, messages flooded in. Public outcry, demands for hearings, names being exposed one by one. And then, one that made her heart stop. "Incoming transmission, encrypted priority level." She clicked it. A video feed opened. Commander Reeves. He looked older than she remembered, tired, but his eyes still carried that cold precision she'd once mistaken for leadership. "Sarah," he said, "or should I say Viper One, you've caused quite the mess." Jake stepped into frame. "You mean we told the truth?" Reeves smiled, the kind of smile that didn't reach his eyes. "You think this is about truth? It's about control, and you've just handed control to chaos." Sarah's voice was steady. "You ordered my death. You used my name to hide your crimes. You made me disappear." "Necessary sacrifices," Reeves said simply. "You were never supposed to be more than an asset." Jake took a step forward. "That asset saved more lives than you ever did sitting behind a desk." Reeves leaned closer to the camera. "And now she'll cost even more. You think the people you just exposed will fall quietly. You think governments will let this go unpunished. You've lit a fuse you can't put out." Sarah's jaw tightened. "Maybe it's time something burned." Reeves exhaled slowly. "You're still the same idealist. Always thought the world could be fixed with enough courage. But courage doesn't win wars, Lieutenant. Silence does." The feed cut to black. Sarah stared at the empty screen, pulse pounding. Jake broke the silence. "He's scared." She shook her head. "He's cornered, and cornered men bite back." The next day, the story hit international outlets. Video proof of Reeves's correspondence appeared online. Anonymous whistleblowers confirmed the leaks. Black River stock plummeted. But with it came the backlash. Talk shows called them traitors. Politicians called them fabrications. And somewhere between the noise and the headlines, truth started to drown again. Sarah sat outside the garage, legs stretched out in the dust, watching the horizon. Jake joined her, 2 mugs of instant coffee in hand. "Feels strange," she murmured, "fighting for something you'll never get credit for." Jake passed her a mug. "Maybe that's what makes it real." She smiled faintly. "You always this poetic sailor." He chuckled. "Only when I'm running on no sleep and bad coffee." They sat in silence a while, the desert wind brushing across their faces. Sarah said quietly, "If this all ends tomorrow, what do you want to be remembered for?" Jake thought for a moment. "That I didn't look away." She nodded slowly. "That's enough." Night fell. They worked by flashlight, moving supplies, double-checking escape routes. The hum of distant engines echoed across the valley, a sound that didn't belong to nature. Jake's head snapped up. "We've got company." Sarah went still, listening. "How many?" "Too many." She grabbed her rifle, chambered around. "Guess Reeves didn't like the press coverage." Within minutes, the valley lit up with headlights, 6 vehicles closing in from 3 directions. Jake and Sarah ducked behind the garage wall. "Think they'll talk first?" he asked. Sarah smirked. "They didn't bring microphones." The first wave hit fast, bullets shredding through metal and glass. Jake returned fire, calculated bursts, covering Sarah as she moved position. Dust clouds rose like ghosts around them. The night stank of gunpowder and fear. Sarah fired 3 clean shots. 2 men dropped. A third screamed, falling into the dust. Jake crouched beside her. "Still with me." She reloaded smoothly. "Always." Then silence. No movement, just the faint creak of wind through the broken roof. Jake's instincts screamed, "They're repositioning." And then came the low whine of a drone overhead. Sarah's face went pale. "They're painting us." Jake looked up. The red laser dot flickered across the floor. "Move." They dove through the back door just as the explosion tore through the garage. The shockwave threw them into the sand. Jake rolled, coughing, ears ringing. The building was gone, just smoke and fire. He called out, "Sarah." No answer. Panic surged through him. He stumbled to his feet, searching through the haze. Then he saw her, half buried under debris, blood streaking her temple but alive. He dropped beside her, hands trembling. "Hey, stay with me." She coughed, wincing. "Still here." He pulled her free, holding her steady. "You're bleeding." She gave a pained smile. "Better than the alternative." Jake looked back at the flames, consuming what little safety they had left. Everything they'd built, gone in seconds. "Reeves won't stop," she said weakly. "He'll bury this again." Jake met her eyes, fierce, unyielding. "Not if I bury him first." They found shelter that night in the ruins of the old chapel. The pews were cracked, the cross half fallen, but it was quiet. Sarah lay against the wall, bandaged, breathing shallow. Jake sat beside her, rifle across his lap. "You should sleep," he said softly. She shook her head. "You know I can't." "Then talk to me." She looked at him, eyes glassy but steady. "Do you ever regret staying in?" He thought for a moment. "Sometimes, but then I remember why I joined." "Why?" "To protect people like you." That earned the faintest laugh from her, raw and real. "You've got a strange way of showing it." He smiled. "Guess I'm still learning." She grew quiet again. "Jake, if I don't make it." "Don't." "Listen to me." Her voice trembled. "If I don't make it, promise me you'll finish this. Get it to the people who can't be silenced." He met her gaze. "You're not dying on me again, Viper." She smiled faintly. "Then you better keep me alive, Seal." He reached out, brushed dirt from her cheek. "Deal." Outside, the wind howled like a warning. The world had seen the truth, and now it was deciding what to do with it. Inside, 2 soldiers, both declared dead, both tired of ghosts, prepared for whatever came next. Because some wars aren't fought for countries. They're fought for the right to exist. And as the firelight flickered over their faces, One truth remained unshaken. Sometimes courage isn't loud. It's quiet, breathing, bleeding, waiting for sunrise. What do you hold on to when the mission becomes the only reason you're still alive? The chapel smelled of dust and smoke. A single beam of moonlight cut through a hole in the roof, landing across the cracked floorboards like a spotlight for ghosts. Jake sat beside Sarah, keeping watch while she dozed in uneasy half-sleep. Every few minutes she flinched, muttering fragments of radio codes, call signs, memories she couldn't shut off. He wanted to reach out, to pull her from whatever nightmare had its claws in her. But how do you wake someone who's been dreaming of war their entire life? Instead, he sat still, rifle across his knees, eyes fixed on the doorway. When dawn came, the desert turned silver. Sarah stirred, blinking against the light. Her voice was rough. "How long was I out?" "Couple hours," Jake said. "You missed my riveting sermon." She smirked faintly. "Did it include coffee?" He held up a dented thermos, communion seal style. She took a sip, grimaced. "Tastes like diesel." "Closest thing to holy water we've got." The brief humor cracked the tension, but not for long. Her wound still bled through the bandage. Jake noticed, frowning. "You need stitches." "I've had worse." "That's not the point." She met his eyes. "We don't have time, Jake. Every hour we waste, Reeves gets further ahead." He exhaled slowly. "Then we stop wasting time." By noon they were on the move again. A stolen pickup, half a tank of gas, and one destination. Reeves's private compound sat outside Fallon, Nevada. Hidden behind military-grade fencing, it looked like a research facility. Jake knew better. It was a fortress built for men who had too much to hide. The drive was silent. Sarah leaned against the window, pale but determined. "You don't have to do this," Jake said quietly. She didn't look at him. "You're wrong." "Sarah, I spent 3 years being erased. I let them decide who I was. If I don't face him now, I'll still be their ghost, just breathing instead of buried." Jake nodded once. "Then we end it." They arrived after dark. The compound glowed faintly in the distance, a cluster of white structures against the desert plain, faint hum of generators, searchlights sweeping slow arcs. Jake parked a mile out and scanned the perimeter through binoculars. 2 guards at the north gate, thermal sensors, cameras on every tower. Sarah adjusted her rifle scope. "Think we can slip through?" "Not without an invitation." She smiled. "Good thing I used to have one." She reached into her pocket, pulling out an old access card, faded, scratched, but still intact. Black River never wiped their ghost files. Guess they didn't expect one to walk back in. Jake stared. "You sure it'll work?" "Only one way to find out." They moved fast, shadows among shadows, crawling beneath fences, avoiding the light arcs. Sarah's card beeped once at a side door, and to Jake's surprise, the lock clicked open. "Guess the dead still get clearance," she whispered. Inside, the corridors were sterile, humming with fluorescent light. No voices, just the low mechanical rhythm of air vents and distant servers. They slipped through hallways until Sarah stopped before a reinforced door labeled Command Ops. "He'll be inside," she said. Jake nodded. "Then let's finish this." She swiped the card. The door opened. Reeves stood behind a desk, back to them, watching multiple screens. Surveillance feeds showed news reports, troop movements, satellite images. Without turning, he said, "I was wondering when the dead would come knocking." Sarah raised her pistol, "Hands where I can see them." He turned slowly, calm as ever. No weapon, no fear, just a faint, smug smile. "You always did prefer dramatics, Lieutenant." Jake stepped forward. "Drop the act, it's over, the files are out." Reeves nodded. "Yes, and already dismissed by half the agencies involved. You think truth survives once it meets bureaucracy. It drowns in red tape and plausible deniability." Sarah's hand trembled, not from fear but fury. You used us. You used me. I used everyone, Reeves said softly. That's the job. Jake's voice hardened. No, that's cowardice dressed as command. Reeves studied him. You of all people should understand necessity, Morrison. You've killed under orders, lied for missions. We all have blood on our hands. The difference is I accepted it. Sarah's eyes burned. You accepted corruption. He shrugged. Same currency, different buyer. For a moment no one moved. Then Sarah lowered the gun slightly, not weakness but decision. You're not worth the bullet, she said. Reeves smiled faintly. That's what makes you predictable. He pressed a hidden switch under his desk. Alarms blared. Jake cursed, we've got to move. They sprinted through the corridor as red lights flashed. Security boots thundered nearby. Sarah staggered once, clutching her side. Blood blossomed through the bandage again. Jake caught her arm. Stay with me. She gritted her teeth. I'm fine. Liar. She smirked weakly. Takes one to know one. They reached the east exit, burst into the open air. Searchlights swept across the sand as vehicles roared to life. Jake dragged her behind a concrete barrier, reloading fast. We can't outrun them. Then we don't, she said, voice hoarse. We expose them here. She pulled a small transmitter from her vest, a failsafe, blinking red. This uplink streams to every open channel tied to the leak. Jake stared. You planned this. Always. Bullets pinged against the barrier. Dust exploded around them. Sarah pressed the trigger on the device. A green light flashed. Somewhere above, a satellite relay activated, transmitting every sound, every image from her helmet cam. The world was watching. She rose halfway from cover, speaking into the mic. Her voice was calm, steady, resolute. My name is Lieutenant Sarah Dalton, Viper 1. I was declared dead 3 years ago under Operation Silver Falcon. The truth is, I was silenced by the same people who profited from our wars. If you can hear this, remember one thing. Silence serves power. Truth serves people. Choose who you serve. A bullet tore past her shoulder, grazing flesh. She staggered but didn't fall. Jake pulled her down, shouting, Enough. She looked at him, breathing hard, blood on her sleeve. It's done. They can't bury it again. He pressed his hand against her wound, trying to stop the bleeding. You're going to be okay. She smiled faintly. Don't make promises you can't keep, sailor. He lifted her gently, carrying her toward the truck parked behind the hangar. Sirens wailed behind them. As they sped into the night, the compound shrank in the rearview, engulfed by chaos, by its own lies unraveling in real time. Hours later, they stopped at a ridge overlooking the desert. Sarah was pale, breathing shallow. Jake worked desperately to stabilize her, but the bleeding wouldn't stop. She caught his hand, gripping it weakly. Hey, she whispered, look at me. He did. You remember that night in the bar? She asked. He nodded, voice tight. Yeah, you made me drop my drink. She smiled faintly. You looked terrified. I was. Why? Because I was staring at a ghost, he said softly. And now I can't lose her again. Her eyes shimmered. You won't. The stars reflected in her pupils, endless, quiet, merciful. Promise me something, she said. Anything. Don't let them rewrite what we did. I won't. Good, her hand loosened. Then it was worth it. Sarah. But her eyes had closed. The desert was silent again. Jake sat there holding her, the wind cold against his face, the transmitter still blinking faintly in the dirt beside them. Proof the signal was still live, that her words were still traveling, echoing across frequencies, across nations. By morning, global networks carried the feed. The truth was out, unfiltered, undeniable. Investigations launched at dawn, arrests followed by noon. Reeves was found hours later, sitting alone in his office, gun in hand, the weight of exposure heavier than any metal he'd ever worn. He didn't run, didn't call for help. He just stared at the photo of his old unit, men and women who'd believed in him once, and understood too late that Sarah Dalton had won. Jake buried her at the edge of the ridge, where the first light touched the sand. No flag, no ceremony, just the sound of wind and the quiet hum of a woman who had given everything for a truth too heavy for most to carry. He carved her call sign into a stone. Viper 1, never forgotten. Then he stood staring at the horizon, the sky burning gold. Her voice echoed in his mind. Silence serves power, truth serves people. He took a deep breath, steadying himself. There were still things to finish, testimonies to give, stories to protect, systems to confront. But for now, he allowed himself one small, sacred thing. Peace. Because she hadn't died in vain. And as he turned to leave, the wind shifted, carrying a faint whisper through the desert air. It sounded like her. Soft, certain, free. Mission complete. How do you live after the mission ends, when the only person who made you believe in something greater is gone? Jake Morrison didn't have an answer. He just kept moving. Days passed like smoke through sunlight. He drove aimlessly across the desert highways, the same roads they once used to flee. Her dog tags hung from the rearview mirror, clinking softly with every bump, the only sound in a truck that now felt far too big for one man. Everywhere he went, the world whispered her name. The news called her a whistleblower. The Pentagon called her a traitor. The people, the ones who still believed in heroes, called her something else, a soldier who told the truth. Her video had gone viral, replayed across every continent, her calm voice cutting through static. Silence serves power, truth serves people. Even now, months later, that line lingered like scripture. Jake parked near an overlook where sand met sky, the horizon endless. He sat on the hood watching the sun sink low. The silence pressed against him, familiar but different now. Not empty, just waiting. He pulled a folded letter from his jacket. The paper was worn, the handwriting careful. Sarah's handwriting. He'd found it in her bag the morning after. The envelope was marked only with 2 words, "If I don't make it." His fingers trembled as he unfolded it. Jake, if you're reading this, it means I didn't get the ending I hoped for, but maybe the one I earned. Don't carry what isn't yours. You were never meant to save me. You were meant to remind me what being alive feels like, even if it was only for a few borrowed days. If the truth survives, don't waste it trying to rebuild what was broken. Build something new. Teach others that courage isn't loud. It doesn't wear medals or make headlines. It's the quiet choice to do what's right, even when nobody will ever know. And when the world forgets my name, because it will, remember this instead. We fought to be seen, we fought to matter, and we did. Viper 1. He folded the letter slowly, pressing it to his chest. For a long time he didn't move. The wind shifted, rustling the paper, carrying her words into the air like prayer smoke. 3 months later, Jake stood in front of a Senate committee. Cameras flashed. The room buzzed with whispered questions, half-truths, politics. He wore a plain suit, no medals, no uniform, no rank. When it was his turn to speak, the room fell silent. "My name is Lieutenant Commander Jake Morrison," he began. 12 years Navy SEAL, decorated for actions I no longer believe deserve decoration. I'm here because someone I knew, someone better than most of us, refused to stay dead for a lie. He paused, scanning the faces before him. Senators, generals, press, ghosts in suits. Sarah Dalton saved my team in Afghanistan. Later, she saved something more important, our integrity. The system buried her to protect profits and politics, and she still chose to tell the truth. I'm not here to justify her actions. I'm here to honor them. He looked straight into the cameras. She once told me that silence serves power. She was right. But what she didn't live to see is this: truth outlives power, always. When he finished, no one spoke. Some shifted uncomfortably, others looked away. But a few, just a few, nodded, and maybe that was enough. Outside the courthouse, the sky opened with rain. Jake didn't run for cover. He let it soak him, washing away desert dust, blood, grief. Reporters shouted questions. He ignored them all, walking through the crowd like a man finally unburdened. Because the mission was over. And somehow, that was the hardest part. He drove north for days, following no plan, sleeping in roadside motels that all smelled the same. Somewhere along the Oregon coast, he found a small town that didn't ask questions. A harbor lined with rusted boats and gulls crying in the fog. He rented a shack overlooking the water, fixed engines for fishermen, drank coffee instead of whiskey, slept without nightmares sometimes. And every morning before dawn, he walked down to the beach and watched the horizon, the same color as the sky over Afghanistan when her helicopter had come through the storm. Some mornings he could almost hear the rotor blades again, could almost see her silhouette cutting through smoke and light. But ghosts don't fly, they linger, quiet, eternal. One afternoon a package arrived, no return address, just his name handwritten. Inside, a small drive and a note. For when you're ready to keep fighting. Oh, you see. Aaron Cole. He plugged it into his laptop. Dozens of files opened, more evidence, new reports, people stepping forward. The world was still changing, slowly, imperfectly, but changing. He smiled. Guess we're not done after all, Viper. That night he recorded a message, not a confession, not a speech, just a continuation. My name's Jake Morrison. You don't know me, and that's fine, but you've heard her voice. You've seen her courage. If you're watching this, understand truth doesn't belong to the brave. It belongs to everyone who refuses to look away. He uploaded the file, closed the laptop, and sat back. Outside, the sea roared against the rocks. He whispered, "Mission continues." Months turned into a year. The world kept spinning. Investigations dragged on, names were cleared, others condemned. Reeves's suicide made headlines for a week and then disappeared, replaced by newer scandals. But Sarah's words endured, etched into murals, quoted in classrooms, whispered among soldiers who'd seen too much. Silence serves power, truth serves people. One evening, Jake visited her grave again. The desert wind was warm this time, carrying the smell of sage and rain. Her marker was simple. Viper 1, SHE flew through fire. He knelt, setting down a single white stone beside it. Thought you'd want to know, he said softly. They built a foundation in your name, scholarships for pilots, PTSD programs for vets. You're still saving people. He smiled faintly. Guess ghosts can still do good. For a while he just sat there, watching the sun dip below the horizon. The world was quiet, not empty, peaceful. And in that silence he felt her again. Not as memory or pain, but as presence, the calm she'd fought so hard to find. He stood, dusted off his hands, and whispered, "Rest easy, Viper 1. We've got it from here." Then he turned toward the fading light, the wind catching his jacket, the sound of engines distant but familiar, like the past saying goodbye. Voiceover soft, reflective, final. They said she died a soldier, but she lived a truth. And maybe that's what courage really is. Not the fight, not the glory, but the choice to stand in the open when the world tells you to hide. Because sometimes dignity doesn't speak. It simply acts.